Hello, Culture Matters podcast. I am very excited to introduce you to our guest. But before I do that, here is a quote we picked just for this episode. Guardian, a home improvement specialist who listens intentionally, communicates clearly, and educates the customer by telling the truth. Our dear friend to the Culture Matters podcast, Robert Frehafer, founder of Guardian Roofing and Siding, is back. I don't know how to explain this man to you other than introduce you to him. I could go on about how many people he helps, how many people, as they said, and he did it posthumously or he did it anonymously, how many people he's mentored in his career, his faith, his friendship to me, his care, the work we've done over the years and the opportunity in that, the culture that he creates everywhere he goes. Today, we're going to talk about values. And one of the values that I have observed him live by and the people that work with him every day. And he's a regular guest of the Culture Matters podcast. I challenge you to listen to all of our episodes together because they're very different. Thanks for coming back.
Thanks for having me back, Jay, and thanks again for an amazing introduction. It's always a nice feeling. The word that comes is humbling, but it's a mixture when you lay out those things, your perspective of me of helping people, mentoring people, the impact in life. I appreciate you sharing that, and it's meaningful. So thanks.
What do you think of values as it relates to business? Like when that word is talked about, what comes to your mind? Because I ask because it's talked about a lot. It's been brought up a lot in the last handful of years in the business environment, and different people have different views on values, their utility, the pros, some not potentially good things that come from even dialogue around them. But what comes to your mind?
So, it is really, it's a big question, but right off the top of my mind, it kind of brings me back to what you just said during the introduction. You said, like, okay, I observed this man, I observed him living these things out. And the reason why that's so impactful is that every time, if I'm not every time do I say it, but very often I think it. When I'm looking at the values that we have written on the wall in the conference room, or I'm sharing it with somebody in an opportunity of what's going on, and pulling from our values of how to answer a question or teach a lesson of how to navigate a situation with like a client and a sales rep, or many different scenarios. But when I reference the value on the wall, the discussion point of it, or the way that it's referenced, is that this is on the wall, but it's on the wall because it's what was observed and written down. And I do, you've heard me say it, and I say it again, I give you the credit for that. It would be a half truth if I just said, Jay Doran wrote the values for the company. So, because that would be then your values. But when you went through the process to spend time with me, get to know me, understand what we do, many sessions of, like, really digging into things, you were helpful to put to word what the actual values are that were observed. So thank you for that, number one. and then it's nice for me because it's an authentic value. So the words that are on the wall represent it. It's like that word came afterwards. So that brings me to
Mm.
the word came after the action, and then your interpretation, your ability to observe it and put it down into writing. But the thing that immediately comes to mind when you say about values is some level of unauthenticness, right? Lack of virtue, not integrity. Some negative type of concept. Like when I think business and I think like values of business and the way it would be written on the wall, or mission, purpose, vision, state, all these different type of statements. I think that I have a negative connotation to that from my exposure to the business world up until our working together. I think that I don't think that, number one, I don't think that I understood the utility of having these things written down. I don't think that I understood the ability to communicate through the organization and outside of the organization what these things meant. I think that I fell into just looking at these type of things like, it's just something that you put on the one more form of marketing.
Mm.
Although it is, they are held together. Marketing and values are held together. But I think I looked at it from a non-virtuous standpoint, almost like this is what we say, that's how I didn't have it written like that. So, and we made a website a while back, an update to a website a decade or so. And we had to write the vision statement or the mission statement.
Mm.
And I started to write stuff, and that's a challenge. I use a lot of words, right? Like, so, but it wasn't very clear. I didn't even understand what I was doing. Even though I was living one out, I was literally living out a mission through the business. I just didn't know how to even put it to word because I think I had such this negative connotation, and I wanted to be separated from what I would consider like a corporate structure that didn't seem authentic, right? So I think that's the biggest challenge is
Wow.
that. And then when I was talking to some people about it, I was getting like feedback from people that have been in corporate, and they would say terms like, it's just like corporate mumbo jumbo. They just want to get you brainwashed, like all these different type of things where, and I'd listen to that, right? Because that's the other side. That is that is potentially my view of that. Like, this is a judgmental view, is that more than likely they've been jaded or they've been hurt. More than likely that employee has been hurt in some form or fashion, or they've observed something that's in opposition to the values that are on the wall,
Mm.
the mission or the vision. If that goes on, then it would take away that trust, and it would seem unauthentic. So that's the first thing that comes to mind with values is in like that. That's how it used to be for me, but now it's really I don't want to say like, oh, it's everything, but it is everything. The values on the wall represent everything. So, and that might even change as time goes on. So for me, it is something that most importantly is lived out. And then from that point, it's clear, it's written, and it's transferred. I have it as a gauge to live out and make decisions, to look back to the rest of the people in the organization, and then outside it's useful for training. So I'll digress. So those are some utilities, and some pros, and some not so positive things. That's what you were asking about. That's my final answer
What are the values?
of my company.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm trying to figure out. No, I'm just kidding. So that's great. I have it written down. I can go back to it and parrot it. And I don't know.
Can we start with G today?
Yeah, that would be good. That would make sense. That's the one that you read, right?
Yeah. Like,
Go there.
what does that mean to you?
So it's so simple, but yet it's
Can you
so
read it again?
useful. The company name is Guardian. So the values are broken down through each letter of the name. So G is the first one, and it's the actual word that's pulled out is the same word, Guardian. So and and basically when I look at it that way, that word it could be many things. And that's an interesting part of values. It's almost not almost, it is a reallocation or a redefining of the word for my particular organization, which I found can actually be a little bit of a challenge in and of itself, because people think like nimble. All right, nimble means this, but then there's this other definition, this utilization of the word, which is interesting to me, and it creates an opportunity to discuss. But anyway, so guardian has some multifaceted utility, and the the main is it's the representative of the company, right? It's the salesperson, it's the person in the office, it's the man on the roof, right? Like it is the person delivering flyers. They're the guardian, right? Like they're representing, they are out there representing the brand and acting as a guardian. Many people have said like, oh yeah, it's great name, right? Like in what you do, and then when you see the work being lived out, they're like, now it makes sense why you have the company name Guardian. You guys are more than just a roofer. Yeah. And when I hear that, I get excited right now talking about it at 6:13 in the morning. But that being said, I'm like, wow, that's awesome. And for me, I at the time when the company name was being formed, I wasn't all the way there with all that, right? Like I just like, I like that name. Like it sounds good. I don't know that I know I don't remember connecting all the dots that people see. I did not connect all the dots that people see lived out today through the name. So that being, and then the name of the, like utilizing that as the name of the person that's involved in the organization. And once again, I give you credit for that, right? You're very helpful with the word and tying these things together. So then as we move on from there, and I do have more things that I could even say about that portion, but I'll digress till we can stick on topic of the values. A home improvement specialist who listens intentionally. So again, breaking it down simply, like, so home improvement, very, very simple. Somebody that, knows about home improvements and what goes on, and a specialist, right? So it's not like, and I'm not saying like, oh, we do everything. We know everything about everything. It's a specialist would specialize in certain things. And that is what we're about. We specialize in roofing and siding, and even that it's boiled down. It's mostly shingle roofing on residential properties, and it's mostly shingle roofing. We do some commercial properties, and it is something that as time goes on, I do have a desire to grow into other avenues, but we are not there yet. But so that specialization is referencing that, who listens intentionally. That is such a great word.
Why?
It makes me pause before I even answer the why, as a mid statement, because that is such a core of what we do. If I don't listen intentionally, everything else I do think will come apart at the seams. If the sales rep doesn't listen intentionally, they do not have the highest probability of opening up that relationship with the client. If the team is not listening intentionally to each other, high probabilities there's going to be frustration, misunderstanding, miscommunication, wasted time. Efficient can't be efficient. You just, somebody doesn't feel listened to, so they're repeating themselves over and over. And I'll digress. It's very important to listen intentionally, and this was again a very big help through our work together through counsel, for me to understand. That was I would say one of my biggest blocking points, or I say blocking points, it was one of my personality traits that I believe would have hindered my success. And by success, I just don't mean making sales or growth of company or, hiring. And although all those things are also part of it, but a success in life, my ability to have peace and and patience and joy, like the way that my faith interacts with my life. And we've talked about this many times. You know, you are an odd subject, or a not well, you're an odd subject, but you are not the person that I would say ideally would be impacting my faith in life, and the way that it is lived out in a daily way. So that ability to be aware and listen, because I did think that I was a great listener, but there was also something going on in my mind as I was listening. I was listening for my own agenda. I was listening to get to the next point. I was listening to utilize that information that I gathered to make my own agenda completed. Or, you know, and there is still utility in that. That's not an inherently evil thing, right? Like, I have to listen to see, are we a good fit in many ways, listen to my counterpart. But I was missing many things on the listening front. I was missing listening to what the person's actually saying, listening for what is unsaid in their message. Are they going to be a good fit? I was only listening to hear like the certain key triggering things that would be in alignment with what I want, rather than listening to what they actually want, which goes to another value that we have, but I'll stay with this one for now. So in an effort to continue to move through it, very important to listen intentionally.
Communicates clearly.
Yeah. So still one that, even as it brings up a little conviction inside, as I just gave that big dissertation about listening intentionally. Did I just communicate that clearly? Right? Did I take too long to say it? It's very important, right, to communicate clearly. That's another thing that we've worked on a lot. And I do believe that it was coming, the source for me personally, the non-activity of communicating clearly was coming from an insecurity, a desire to be heard, not feeling like people are understanding me. So I was saying so much, giving so many examples to try to communicate clearly that I could lose people, or things could take significantly longer, or withholding. This was a real bad part. Withholding truth, right? Omitting something, which would in essence be lying, right? Like omitting those truths. So clear communication. And also another application is having open conversations. We often term, you and I, Jay, you've conflict, right? That having conflict, navigating conflict, right? But being open and transparent with the things that are in conflict with each other. They're uncomfortable. So that all rolls into communicating clearly. And again, so
What
important.
rises up when at the end by telling the truth?
The very first thing that rises up doesn't mean it's the most utilized or whatever. And it could be, it's more than likely because of my own personality, but educates the customer by telling the truth. The thing that rises up the most is that the things that I would not want to share with a client because I may lose the opportunity, that's what rises up the most. Like the fearful things, right? Like, oh, if I say this, I might reveal to them that we're not a good fit, and I might lose the opportunity to work with them. From a work standpoint, I'm talking work in a sales capacity from a homeowner to me as a salesperson. Now, this would apply to every other relationship in the organization. Educates the counterpart by telling the truth. That's going to apply, and there's fear in loss. What if you say FOMO, fear of missing out, right?
Yeah.
Like, so, but that part of it, as soon as I am aware, and a lot of times I become aware just by my feelings, right? Or my thought pattern. Once I'm aware, some self-awareness of a pattern that I'm going through, or feeling, or a past experience. And I say the feeling, like kind of like a negative feeling, like when I'm like, oh, like start to recognize something might not be a good fit. And it might not be like, oh, they're a bad client. I just not be the best. I may not be, my services may not be the best fit for them, where they should do something else that would not financially or relationally benefit me. That's what rises up the most. The hard things to say. But this is a balance, right? To be able to navigate what things rise up, what are just my emotions, how do I not jump to conclusions and assume that it's not a good
I
fit.
think it's really inspiring to hear your thoughts, because I've seen you in the field listen intentionally, communicate clearly, educate the customer by telling the truth. I think it's a healthy paradox where I'm acknowledging you've done those things and you're admitting where you believe you've lacked in those things. Like if we turned it around and you were pontificating on how you just are a perfect representation of this observation,
I am,
then
but
and then and then it was me that had to say, well, you didn't do this here, you didn't do this here, you didn't do this here. It's I think it would be a different conversation. It would show a different degree of leadership. So I think that in itself is something to acknowledge that rises up in me. It's an exciting observation of your leadership, because listening to you, I'm here. I could speak my own story of where I feel I've been weak and insecure in my listening, in my communicating clearly, in my um, leaning through omission and embracing a conversation that I was anxious about. And I believe the audience our brothers and sisters, in a sense, can relate to that. In closing, you mentioned earlier the two big things. Those have had a negative impact or negative feedback about values, as well as your former thoughts around their utility, like years ago in a business context. Can you unpack today your thoughts on the value of values in a business context, and also how the brainwashing can be avoided? So like what is the actual results of thinking about even this conversation in the business context, in case we have anyone listening to this that they may be where you once were, or where some others that are where maybe they've had a bad experience with a culture?
Thanks for asking. Just before jumping into that, though, I appreciate your awareness of your own self-awareness and vulnerability to share those things about your potential lacking, and pointing out my self-awareness in it. And it is something that I do think there's utility. I agree there's utility in other people to hear that talk. And if I was to sit here and because there is a large majority of the time, I think the concept that I am potentially judgmental of myself and you are judgmental of you, that I am judgmental of myself and you are internally judgmental of yourself. I think it's that propels growth and the actual activity that you observe in me at a higher level, because I'm so self-judgmental. If I wasn't, then maybe I wouldn't be, that would theoretically be, then I wouldn't be as externally attempting to listen intentionally, communicate clearly, and tell the customer the truth. So these things, and this is a
Mhm.
pattern I'm starting to recognize, not only here, like if I have a Bible study just last night, and it was like this little statement, I'm like, oh, that's convicting to my heart. Oh, that thing is convicting to me. And it could be, it's just me. I don't want to, give a judgment on anybody else, but for me, that more than likely is something that is the catalyst to move. And you use the terminology, you say like, I don't want to butcher it, but something like it's the internal conflict that makes creation, like externally, right? Like almost like potentially the more trauma that somebody has been in, the more desire to fix outside and grow and can become these amazing entrepreneurs. So this, it's almost like the trauma and the things that have gone on in life that impacted us. Doesn't have to be trauma in such a negative sense, but my experience, right, is that then those things can then propel us to be a certain way. They also can
Well, if
make
something
us,
I've learned from you in your language would be that another way of thinking of it is I'm actually I think it'd be I'm all right with us going in this direction. I think this is a value part of the conversation. Correct me if I'm wrong, because you're counseling this, but the suffering, life is there's suffering in life, and then that is a call to it's a call to our faith, like at some deep level. So I worry that our general culture can actually negate each of our individuality in the audience by just the over dramatization of it being trauma, as opposed to this is part of life. And okay, what are we doing with it of value? So just in retort to your
well,
piece there.
I appreciate it. And I know that you have some time that we are over. We're coming very close
Yeah,
to
well, this is a
that
good
timing.
open loop for the next
Yes. But
value.
I want to answer that question. Do you want me to answer the question before we
Absolutely. But
wrap?
the next
Okay.
value, are you all right with doing, on a weekly basis, the values?
Of course. Yeah. Really, even as we're doing it right now, I'm like, man, this is that little chunk right there that we already went through. That's here. I should really, so this is going to be reflective of the answer I'm going to give you right now. That would really be a good thing to share with everybody, right? Like even we have these training modules that they would watch. This is the value. Here's the training part of this. Here's how this is how to start thinking like
And
these
this is
values are
really
act.
fun. And I truly was almost, it took every ounce of me this morning to keep this commitment at 6 a.m. because of how poorly I slept. But it was my values that got me up. And to the point where when you asked me before you started, how are you doing in the morning? I was like, I can't even answer this yet. I don't know how to answer this.
I had to ask you twice.
Let me just try to do this so I could be here for Robert. Um, and now I feel so much better because here we are learning together, talking. So the you, and it's so yeah, I think that's something I want to share. It's not easy, and so the you. Next time we're going to talk about the you and the you. So the audience should stay tuned to that. But in closing, what is your answer to that question about
Yeah.
those that the utility of values as it relates to a business context? What's the utility? That would be I should
Yeah.
ask just simply like that.
Yeah. So simple answer to that based off of, and you prefaced it originally like based off of negative feedback that you've heard or people say, oh, it's brainwashing and what's the utility? My former thoughts and then what are they now? So to try to compact that because I'm still becoming aware of it, right? Like even though we were able to you were able to observe right, I was able to tweak and agree and start to implement putting them on the wall and utilizing them and sharing them on social media. And then now more recently, over the last year or so, you pull back more to them and talk about them through what we do. And even to the point when I do an interview or have somebody in for an interview, we sit them in the conference room at a certain spot. All the values are on the wall in front of them. I purposely wait a few minutes to go in to hopefully give them the opportunity to read through some of those things. And so the utility of them, I believe, I'm just becoming aware of the greater understanding. And then how to regularly, because I don't even have them all memorized perfectly. I know them, I conceptually, but I, even when I'm like, oh yeah, this, I was like, let's go to, I would say, let's go to the conference room, and I'd prank somebody from the office or in there, like, yeah, see this right here and see this one right here. This is how this is
That's
applying.
awesome.
So in my mind, I would like to get them memorized, but it's not only about me, it's about the other people in the industry, in my company, in the organization, to understand them, then to broadcast it out through social media, website, technology, through the technology that we have, as well as in the medium of meeting people, right? Or meeting homeowners or meeting vendors or install, whatever it is, that each person has these values that they're continually understanding. And they say, oh, so he said, oh, how do you do it? Well, it's part of our value. Our N is this right here. And so we got these like real nice clipboards with like inside things. We got wrap, like the wrap that we use for our truck. And on the back of it, it has the Guardian. It has the G value right on the back of it,
Wow.
of that clipboard. So it's more in proximity of their utilizing the medium, whatever it is, like that's a clipboard or social or the plaque on the wall, to impact and influence. And so when you say the word brainwash, I have a different feeling or thought from that. Like, that sounds like a real negative connotation, to brainwash someone. But from being in the program, like a 12-step program, and they would say like, yeah, my brain needs a little washing. So I'm not a negative, it's impacting. And the hope is that these values, when each one is uncovered, is a positive impact. So and even from a biblical standpoint, like, our heart is wickedly deceitful. That's what it says. And our heart is like who we are, and the brain is part of that. So to wash it a little bit, to be honest, listen intentionally, and communicate clearly, sounds like a good plan to me. Not to make, and I think the connotation is that somebody becomes a robot and they're not open to
Mm.
think about other things, and they'll only do certain things, and they're closed off from even being open-minded to consider stuff, right? Like, so that being said, that my connotation of it is entirely changing, because especially because of the way that it's been introduced to me, that the values on the wall are reflective of what is being lived out, not the other way around. If it's the other way around, where there's okay, there's this thing on the wall, so now I have to do this, and that's where culture matters. If the people that are coming into the business, they don't have the same culture, or not even assimilate to strive towards a culture of that way, it's not going to be a good fit. And then so all these things start to work together, right? Like the awareness of it, the communication of it, the language, I will attract. And that's what has been going on. There's been an attraction of similar culture type of individuals. They want to be honest, they're hardworking, they want to serve someone, they want to meet people's needs. And I do believe that's because it's, once I became more clear, even though I did my daily actions when we originally started meeting, and but when it became on the word of it, right, written, and even that, so it was fuzzy to me, like, all right, well, that's that, and it wasn't as valuable. Then I started to implement some of it, became more valuable. So because of that, my lack of awareness of all the ways that it will be implemented and can be implemented, and even with the change of technology, as things move forward, there could be more and more implementation. But yeah, so I hold it in a much higher regard. But at the same time, there's that same convicting spirit inside, like, oh, I don't have it memorized. I believe I could be utilizing this better. I believe that I could be utilizing this in many more things that we do, demonstrations with homeowners, interviews with employees, meetings that we have. There's like to speak through these values, ask questions that are built around the values. There can be more utility in it that I'm executing currently. So that's
Well,
my
that
answer.
excites me because I think even us, some of the, how do I say it? Well, the C in Culture Matters is collaboration, give first, intend to help, and get started today. So, us collaborating in this episode and over these coming months as you in your journey of where you actually are with the values live, not editing it. The audience could decide if that's important to them over the coming months. And at the end of it, the truth will set us free. Oh yeah, it's a bunch of crap. Or, this has been helpful. Like in this even more ways than that in that first time we had that conversation. And I think what better way than to represent what this show is about and really evolving into than have you live the G right now today, right? Tell the truth, educate the customer by telling the truth, in a sense, like educating the audience, because entrepreneurs listen to this show and people that want better culture, is my guess in some respect. So let's see how we do. Thank you for coming on this episode and talking about the G. Yeah, closing thoughts.
I do. It's not an overall closing thought, but in retort to what you just said, in response to that, when you said, "Oh, they'll find out if it's all a bunch of crap or something like this," and I have to comment to that because, based on somebody's perspective or experience or impact, and how involved they are, there may be one person that catches me on a bad day when I'm not exempling the values on the wall in one minute, and it could really be uncomfortable for them or for me or whatever, and I might have to go back and apologize, or I might not even be aware that something I said impacted them. So from their view, it might be crap, right? Like, they're, and that goes back to that view that people have, that I heard, like, it's a bunch of corporate mumbo jumbo, it's just sales stuff, because they get to see that in all, it's, I'm human, right? That's the thing. I'm gonna blow it sometimes. And having these values written out are a helpful guidance for myself as well. Like, oh, it's a standard for me to hold to. And it's a teaching thing even within the organization, because not everybody's gonna walk in having the same beliefs as me and the same exact, convictions and life experiences. So they might experience a guardian that's not, living all of these values out to that extent. So I say that because, yes, Jay, I do believe that the closer somebody gets to guardian, or the closer they get to a guardian, and the more awareness that they have of what values that we have, and now that we're putting them out here, the probability of that is going to rise up some. They're going to see, like, oh, it's crap, but it's not crap. It's just one sliver in a time of someone's life. So that all or nothing is, it could be detrimental to me. Like, says, let me just rip it off the wall. Let me not even try anymore. I blew it. Right. Like I could talk myself out of these things, or other people could have. So I just wanted to share that in response to what you're saying. Like, as these months go by, people will see, what is this? And they might, right? And that's the new conflict to have. That's living through our culture. And maybe our culture changes. Maybe what we thought it was, has changed, and there's different values. That's my closing for, yeah.
Thank you all for listening to this episode of the Culture Matters podcast.